Shot him. Shot again.
Shot him in the head.
The Taliban fighter stands in a pitch-black room in Afghanistan, an AK-47 in his hands, a kidnapped American behind him. He thinks he's the most dangerous thing in that room. He has 1 second left to learn how wrong he is because the SEAL coming through that doorway is about to kill him and 2 more men in 90 seconds flat with a rifle, his bare hands, and the wall behind his head. What you're about to see is the most intense Navy SEAL combat ever recorded. In one of these fights was caught on a drone a man everyone believed was dead, getting back up and fighting on alone. This is the story of when a Navy SEAL smokes Taliban fighters. December 2012. An American doctor named Dilip Joseph had been pulled off a road in eastern Afghanistan and dragged into the mountains by the Taliban. The intelligence was brutal in its simplicity. He would be moved the next day and he would probably be executed. There was no time to plan something elegant. So a team of SEALs went. They walked into the wilderness in the dark and climbed for hours across open ground where there was nowhere to hide. The compound where the doctor was being held looked down over the entire valley, which meant the enemy could see anything moving toward it. The SEALs covered that last stretch knowing they were exposed the whole way. Then a guard spotted them and bolted inside to warn the others. The clock that had been ticking quietly just started screaming. Surprise was gone. Now, it was a foot race to the door before the men inside could kill the hostage and run, and that's where Edward Byers came in. He was the breacher, the man whose job was to get through the door. He hit that doorway and found it choked with those heavy blankets, hung deliberately to trap whoever entered. Fully lit up by the gunfire pouring out at him, Byers grabbed the blankets and tore them down with his bare hands to clear a path for his team. The first man through, his teammate Nicholas Sheck, was hit immediately by fire from inside. Byers went in right behind him. The first thing he saw was a guard swinging an AK-47 up toward him. Byers put him down. He tackled the next man, wrestled him to the floor with his bare hands, felt for a weapon, confirmed he wasn't the hostage, and dealt with him too. Then, over the gunfire, he heard a voice answer in English from across the room, and he understood instantly what that meant. That was the doctor. So Byers threw his own across the room and landed on top of the hostage, covering the man with his own armor while rounds kept tearing through the air. But it wasn't over. While he was lying on top of the doctor, shielding him, Byers spotted one more enemy fighter directly behind the hostage, close enough to touch. He couldn't get a clean shot without endangering the man he was protecting, so he did the only thing left. He reached out, got his hand around that fighter's throat, and pinned him to the wall. He held him there, physically held a Taliban fighter against the wall by the neck for the seconds it took his teammate to line up and fire a precise shot that ended the threat. The doctor lived. The mission worked, but Sheck, the first man through that door, didn't make it back. He was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. Byers received the Medal of Honor, the first living Navy SEAL to receive it since Vietnam. Now Byers had something the next man in this video did not. He had a door between himself and the enemy, and a team coming through it right behind him. The next story is 4 men alone on the side of a mountain, with no door and no help for a very long way. June 28, 2005, 4 SEALs were dropped deep behind enemy lines in the Hindu Kush Mountains, almost 10,000 feet up, to find a Taliban commander who ran a fighting group near the Pakistani border. Their leader was Lieutenant Michael Murphy. It went wrong in the worst. Local goat herders wandered straight into the SEALs' hidden position. The team now had a choice: kill unarmed civilians to protect the mission, or let them walk and accept that they would almost certainly tell the Taliban exactly where 4 Americans were sitting. They let them go. Within a couple of hours, the mountainside above them came alive. The 4 SEALs were surrounded by some accounts dozens of fighters, by others far more, and the enemy had the high ground and the numbers. They came at the team from 3 sides at once. The SEALs fought and fell back, forced down the steep face of the mountain. To break away from the fire, these men were throwing themselves off ledges, drops of 20-30 feet, slamming into rock, getting up, and fighting again. Every one of them was wounded. The radios didn't work in that terrain. They were cut off, being outnumbered, and nobody back at base even knew the depth of the trouble they were in. There was only one way to fix that: Someone had to get a signal out, and the only place a signal would reach was out in the open away from any cover, directly in the enemy's line of fire. Murphy already had grave gunshot wounds. He made the decision anyway. He moved out into open ground, sat himself down exposed to everything the enemy could throw at him, and made the call to headquarters. Calmly, and people who heard it later could not get over how calm he was. He gave their location and the size of the force hunting them, and he asked for help for his men. While he was on that call, he was shot in the back. He dropped the transmitter, and then he picked it back up, finished the call, said thank you at the end of it, and went back to fighting beside his teammates. That call is the only reason the story didn't die on that mountain with everyone in it. It brought the rescue, but the rescue helicopter, packed with more SEALs and Army Night Stalkers racing to save them, was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade as it came in, and every man aboard was killed. By the end, Murphy was gone. So were two of his three teammates. Only one man, Marcus Luttrell, survived, and his story became the book and the film Lone Survivor. Michael Murphy received the Medal of Honor. The fight cost roughly 35 of the enemy their lives as well. Murphy walked into open fire to save the men around him. The next man did something that, on paper, sounds like it should be physically impossible. March 4th, 2002, a different peak, a different freezing night, but the same brutal math, high ground held by the enemy, and Americans below it. A SEAL recon team is coming in by helicopter to set up an observation post on the summit. The problem is that Al-Qaeda is already on the summit, dug into bunkers, waiting. The instant the helicopter flares to land, the mountain opens up machine guns and RPGs rip through the airframe, and the aircraft bucks so hard that one SEAL, Petty Officer Neil Roberts, is thrown clean out the back into the snow as the crippled bird falls away down the valley. Now, Senior Chief Britt Slabinski is at the bottom of the mountain, and one of his men is alone at the top of it, surrounded by the enemy that just shot them down. Every sane reading of the situation says Roberts is gone, and going back is suicide. Slabinski went back. He rallied his team, got on another helicopter, took fire again on the way in, and then led 6 men in a frontal assault straight up that icy slope into the bunkers uphill, in deep snow, at the highest altitude American troops have ever fought, taking fire from 3 directions at once. Slabinski personally charged a bunker, putting fire into the enemy positions at close range, his men right behind him, the snow around them snapping with incoming rounds. He exposed himself again and again, walking his guns onto muzzle flashes in the dark, killing the fighters who were killing his team. The enemy had the high ground in the bunkers, and they made the team pay for every meter. Men went down. The fire became a wall. And when it became clear that staying meant losing the whole team, Slabinski grabbed a critically wounded teammate, hauled him bodily through the snow, and fought a withdrawal back down the mountain while calling fire onto the peak behind him. For leading that assault, for choosing to climb back into the worst place on earth that night, he received the Medal of Honor. But that fight is not over, because when Slabinski's team pulled off that peak, they left a man behind a man they were certain was dead, and a drone was watching. What that camera recorded next is the part almost nobody knows. On that same night, fighting alongside Slabinski's SEAL team, was an Air Force combat controller named John Chapman. His job was the airstrikes to stand at the scene between the men on the ground and the firepower in the sky and bring it down with precision. When the team came under fire, Chapman charged. He ran up that steep snow-choked slope and assaulted an enemy bunker head on, and he cleared it. Then he moved to take on a second position, a machine gun, and there, exposed on open ground, he was hit hard and went down. In the dark, in the chaos, his teammates believed he was dead. Slabinski, under withering machine gun fire with grenades landing around him, looked through his night vision and saw that the infrared laser on Chapman's weapon had stopped moving. "He's dead," he told the team, and they made the agonizing call to withdraw down the mountain so a gunship could pound the enemy positions from above. Hovering over that peak the whole time was a Predator drone, recording everything. And years later, when the Air Force went back and studied that footage, it showed something that stopped people cold. After the team withdrew after John Chapman had been left for dead on that mountaintop, he got back up, alone, severely wounded, surrounded by the enemy on every side, and he kept fighting. The footage shows one man in a bunker defending himself against fighters closing in on him, holding them off, even one of them. He fought on by himself in the snow against an entire enemy position for over an hour, and he wasn't just fighting to survive. As an American rescue helicopter came in toward that peak, the footage shows Chapman throwing himself back into the fire to take on an enemy machine gun that was about to tear that incoming aircraft apart, giving the men aboard a chance with the last minutes of his life, even though no one had come back for him. He died on that mountain. For years, his family was simply told he'd been killed when his helicopter went down. The truth, the hour-long last stand, the man rising after being left behind, only came out because a camera in the sky had quietly recorded all of it. It became the first Medal of Honor action ever captured on video. In 2018, 16 years later, John Chapman's award was finally upgraded to the Medal of Honor, the first airman to receive it since Vietnam. 4 of the men in this video chose to run toward death to save someone else. The 5th one did something even harder to put into words. He saw death coming, had a clear way out, and stepped into it on purpose. September 29, 2006. A rooftop in Ramadi, in one of the most violent districts of the entire war. Michael Monsour was a SEAL machine gunner, up on that roof with 2 of his teammates and several Iraqi soldiers, running a sniper overwatch position, the job where you watch over everyone else and give them early warning. That morning, the enemy started probing them, testing the position, working out where the Americans were. The SEAL snipers took down 2 of them on the first attempt, but the enemy kept coming, hammering the rooftop with rocket-propelled grenades and small arms fire. Monsour took a spot with his machine gun between his 2 teammates, right next to the single way off that roof. Of everyone up there, Monsour was the one man positioned to get out fast. If anything went wrong, he had the door. Then a fighter got close and threw a fragmentation grenade up onto the roof. It hit Michael Monsour in the chest and dropped to the ground at his feet. He had a clear path to the exit. His teammates, pinned in their positions, did not. There was a second to understand all of that, and Monsour understood it completely. He yelled grenade to warn the men around him, and then, instead of saving himself, he dropped down onto it and pulled it under his own body. The grenade went off beneath him. He absorbed the blast with everything he was, and it killed him. But the 2 teammates on either side of him and the Iraqi soldiers up there with them lived. One of the men he saved later said there was no hesitation in it at all. He looked over, yelled the warning, and covered the grenade. For Mike, the way President Bush put it afterward, there was no choice at all. Michael Monsour was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. And what gets me about his story isn't the explosion, it's the geometry of it. He was the one who didn't have to die. He understood that in the time it takes most of us to flinch, and he chose his friends over himself with the last second he had. And Monsour fought that whole battle with everything a body can give a man. The last man in this video gave more than that, because half of his was already gone. March 17, 2010. The Hindu Kush Mountains of eastern Afghanistan. The dead of night. A SEAL Team 6 assault element has fast roped out of helicopters and is closing on a fortified Taliban compound dug into the high ground, and the men inside are ready and waiting behind walls built to anyone who comes up that slope. As the SEALs push in, the compound erupts. Heavy fire pours out of fortified positions inside the walls, and part of the assault team is caught in the open with nowhere to go. They go flat in the dirt. Rounds crack over their heads. They can't lift up to shoot, can't move forward, pinned under accurate fire from a fixed position above them. And a team pinned in the open in front of a fortified gun is a team that gets cut to pieces where it lies, one man at a time, unless something changes in the next few seconds. The man who changed it was a chief named Adam Brown. That is the man who was lying in the fire that night watching his brothers get pinned in the open. He got up and he ran straight at the compound. Not for cover, there was none worth reaching. He ran at the guns deliberately to put himself in front of them. Half blind, firing left-handed, Brown charged the fortified enemy position out in the open and started putting rounds into it from a better angle, drawing the compound's fire directly onto himself and away from his pinned-down teammates. Every weapon in those walls that had been hunting the men in the dirt now had a single sprinting target to track instead him. He was hit. He kept charging, firing, kept drawing the guns. The fire that should have been killing his team was now chasing one man across open ground, and that was the whole point. Every round aimed at Adam Brown was a round not aimed at the men he'd just bought time to move. He was hit again, and this time the wounds were mortal. He went down still facing the compound, oriented on the enemy he had spent his last seconds pulling onto himself. His team lived. The SEALs pinned in the open got up and back into the fight, because the fixed gun that had them dead to rights was, in its final moments, aimed at the wrong man, the one who'd made sure of it. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star, the nation's third highest decoration for valor. A man loses the eye a shooter lives by and teaches himself to shoot with the other one, loses the use of his hand and learns to fight with the other one, spends a whole career forcing a broken body to do things it has no business doing, and then, on his last night, with one eye and a rebuilt hand, he looks at a fortified gun and a row of his brothers pinned in front of it, and he decides to be the target. That is what fearless actually means. Not a man who feels no fear. A man who has already lost more than most people could survive losing and gets up and runs at the guns anyway. Here's the thing about every fight in this video. It isn't the body count that makes it land. What makes SEAL combat footage hit different is the distance, or the lack of it. Every one of them had a safer option in the exact second it mattered, and every one of them looked at it and chose the harder thing, because the man next to them was worth more than the way out. If this is the kind of story you want more of, let me know down in the comments which of these 5 hit you the hardest. I read them, and the ones you tell me about shape what I cover next. Thanks for watching all the way to the end.